Hello and welcome back to a new lecture. In our last lecture, we discussed some certain types of definite reference. We talked about personal pronouns. We talked about the various types of deictic reference. Now we talk about proper names and definite descriptions. So one type of definite reference was achieved through the use of proper names. A proper name is a name like John or Mary and so on. Now proper names seem to be purely referential, in that they establish a relation between a name and the person. And the reason why we say that it is purely referential, is that usually names have no meaning. So what is the meaning of the word John or the name Mary? There is no meaning. Now in a lot of languages around the world, usually the name of the person actually means something. So your name could originally mean some type of flower, or it could mean, a pearl, right? Although these names have really nice connotations, the fact of the matter is you are not a flower and you are not a pearl. You're a human. So even these kinds of names do not refer or do not have meaning intrinsically built in them. That's why we say that proper names are purely referential. If they are purely referential, then how do they work? Remember, purely referential means that we can skip going through the mediated phase of sense. So I could say John refers directly to John without having to go through sense. So how does it work? So in Saul Kripke's 1980 Naming and Necessity, a thought experiment was introduced to get you to think about exactly how proper names should and could work. Take this as an example. Now Shakespeare is a very well-known playwright. We might all know Shakespeare as a person who wrote Hamlet, for example. Now if I were to ask you, who is Shakespeare? Do you know Shakespeare? Now you might claim to say that, yeah, you know Shakespeare. Then I ask you, well, who is he? And you say, well, he's the person who wrote Hamlet. Great. Okay. Now imagine that someone all of a sudden comes up with a new discovery, that it was actually this person here, Christopher Marlowe, who wrote Hamlet. So now, the description we have of Shakespeare as a person who wrote Hamlet no longer exists. So now I ask you the question again. Who is Shakespeare? Now you have nothing to describe Shakespeare with. Now with these two pictures up, I ask you again. Which one of these photos represents a photo of Shakespeare? Now even though we all of a sudden find out that it was Christopher Marlowe who wrote Hamlet, the strange thing is that we still associate the name Shakespeare with this person, not with Christopher Marlowe. Even though it turns out that Shakespeare did none of the things that we thought he did. And we haven't met him in person. We don't even know if he even existed. How come we are still able to connect Shakespeare with this person? Well, there are theories of proper names that attempt to explain how this happens. The first theory is called the description theory. The description theory states that to know what a name refers to, you must know the description of that name. So you must have at least just a little bit of description in order to connect the name with the actual person. But recall our thought experiment. We've just seen that the description of Shakespeare has changed. He is no longer the person who wrote Hamlet. But at the same time, we are still able to connect the word Shakespeare with the person Shakespeare. Therefore, the second theory that deals with proper names is called the causal theory. The causal theory assumes no need for knowing the description. Actually, the description is irrelevant to the causal theory. Causal theory suggests that there is a naming event that takes place regardless of the description of that person. So let's say Shakespeare was born, and his mother called him Shakespeare for no apparent reason. As the days go by, the use of the name Shakespeare becomes common usage. It becomes grounded into our everyday language use. Therefore, even if the description of Shakespeare has changed, the relationship of the word or the name Shakespeare to the actual person will not change, because it was never dependent on the description of that person in the first place. So what do you think? Can you come up with some kind of hybrid theory connecting both the description theory and the causal theory? Take this example. Sometimes kids are playing. One kid is a very slow kid, meaning that this kid runs very slowly. In consequence, the other kids give him a nickname, which is Captain Slow. The years go by, Captain Slow graduates from high school, but now Captain Slow is in the NFL and is the fastest runner there. Captain Slow is no longer slow, but now his friends meet up with him 10 years later, and the first time they see him they say, "Hello, Captain Slow." Think about this situation and try to see if you can come up with a hybrid theory. And that pretty much sums up the theories of proper names.